Okay, we'll get started. My name is Carolyn Chow. I'm a lead program manager with the reporting services team. I'm based out of Redmond, so I'm very excited to be here because it's really nice here. We've had like 1 week of summer in Redmond, and I missed it because it was last week. Otherwise, it's been like rainy and dreary the whole time, exactly what you would think Seattle would be like. I've been with Microsoft a long time. It'll be 13 years this month, tomorrow, I guess, this coming month. All of that in BI. I used to own a lot of the internal data warehousing for Microsoft internally. So I've been in your shoes trying to get this stuff to all work together. And then I decided I had enough of that, so I joined the product team about 9 years ago, and I've been working on reporting services for about the last 7. So we're here to talk about what's new in Denali for reporting services specifically. How many of you were in my Crescent session yesterday? A lot of you, excellent. Okay, so I asked the same question I asked yesterday, which is how many of you are DBAs? Okay, how many of you are IT folks? And you're laughing. Sometimes it's the same. Developers? Okay. Okay, business people. 1! We got 1 today! Yay! Okay. Yeah, that's always a little bit of a challenge. So we're going to talk about what's new in reporting services, and this is in the schedule. It says this is a 300 level session, and it's really only that because I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about what we've done in the past or how reporting services works, but really it's an overview session, right? There's no way I'm going to cover everything what's new in reporting services and do it in real depth. So it's really to give you an idea of the big areas that we're investing in, show you a bunch of demos that help you get started with all the different areas, and hopefully give you some pointers for how it all works together. But no coding or anything like that here. All right, so oftentimes what happens when you release and you work on another product, which is what we do all the time, we forget what we did. So we have one slide to remind ourselves that we actually shipped 2008 R2 just earlier this year, right? So for you guys, it's a brand new product. For us, we haven't worked on it in a little while, so I particularly tend to forget, so I put this slide together. We invested very heavily in corporate BI in SQL Server 2008 R2. We spent a whole ton of time making sure that we had a really great operational reporting tool, right? And there's 2 of them, actually. There's Report Designer and there's Report Builder. And some of the feedback that we had heard was that we were missing some key capabilities, and that also Report Builder was a little bit too hard to use for the power users that we were targeting. So we did a couple of things. First of all, in all the tools that we have in 2008 R2, we added some new visualizations, the biggest one being spatial support, whether it's geographic with geographic maps or SQL Spatial in general. So you can do any kind of spatial reporting that's supported by SQL Server. We also support a whole bunch of different formats of maps. So if you have Esri or any of those other map packages, those are all supported. The biggest thing probably for consideration for map is that we only ship US maps out of the box, and that wasn't our choice. So that was a legal decision. And apparently, if we had shipped anything other than the US, some of us would have been in big trouble and gone to prison, apparently. So I really apologize, because I know we're not in the US, but we were not allowed to ship non-US maps in the box. But the good thing is you can grab your US maps and you can put them on the report server, and it can be a shared resource that everybody can point to. So get your maps, and you can get them from Esri. There's a whole bunch of places where you can actually download free maps and use them. So go do that. So we added map, we added gauges and spark lines and data bars and KPIs. So all of those are really, really easy to use now. For all of those, there are little wizards that you can use in reporting services, in Report Builder and in bids, and just little dialogues that are very easy to use. You can do very powerful things with those. In terms of helping users get started very quickly with Report Builder, we added what we call the component gallery, or report parts in the report part gallery. And what that is really the ability for users to get started by not having to start from scratch, right? We've done a whole bunch of studies, and we've done a whole bunch of surveys of our customers and talked to them over time. And we find that the 2 hardest things to do for users is all around getting started. One is when they open the application, it's very scary because it's blank and they have no idea where the data is, right? So connecting to the data is the #1 hardest thing. And the second thing is starting from scratch and writing a query, right? We have graphical query designers and they kind of work, but there's still a learning curve associated with them, right? So what we did is we've always had shared data sources. We support them natively in server mode in Report Builder, so you can point to the server and get those shared data sources. That helps users with the first hurdle. The second hurdle of having to start from an actual blank slate and doing design is addressed by the report parts. And basically what you guys can do to help your end users is build parts that you publish to the server, and then your users go and just grab those parts, add them to their report, and then they can refine them and tweak them. But at least they're not starting from scratch, right? So with parts, you can publish anything like a shared data set. So if your users are okay with building all their visualizations themselves, they just need a little head start by grabbing a query that you've built for them, you can do that. Or you can publish whole visualizations. So you could publish a map, and that map will contain all the data sets, all the parameters, and all the data sources that are associated with that map. And when they pull it in, they get all of that, and they don't have to configure all of it. It's all connected up and wired correctly. They can just go and maybe change the color or change the highlighting rules or whatever it is that they want to do. So that's really important to help users get started. When they pull in something from the report part gallery, what happens is when they save the report, that connection to where the part is in the server and the master copy of that part gets kept. So if you go and update that part, the next time the user goes to edit the report, they'll actually get a little notification. This report part has changed. They'll get a little visualization that shows them what it looks like in their report and what it looks like in the server currently. And they can do a little validation and say, yeah, I want the new version or not. And they can have that option to keep getting notified of those changes or stop getting notified and basically have their own copy of that report part. So those are all great capabilities. Some of the other things we did were we added support for Ajax in our report viewer. That helps us with a bunch of design and performance and all kinds of things. So that's really great. And then we did a whole bunch of little DCRs from Connect. So if you don't think we don't listen, if you think that when you enter items in Connect and they don't get listened to, that's not true. We actually look at them every single month. We have a review at our entire group level with our management about the things that are in Connect and the things that are being voted on. And we look at the top things that are being voted on, as well as things that are changing rapidly. So if there's an issue with a patch or something, we'll see something get reported on Connect, and the number of votes will rise very quickly, and we'll take action on those. So do use Connect. Because we spent so much time on corporate reporting, we actually had to cut a couple of key scenarios, and they were ad hoc reporting and alerting, and you'll see that come back in what we're doing in this release. Okay, so that was Denali. That was SQL Server 2008 R2. Just a quick recap. It's not everything that we did, but some of the highlights. So when we started Denali, hopefully you'll be happy to know there is actually BI leadership across Microsoft. We have a ton of products that you guys know participate in BI, and we do have a team that leads basically the discussion about priorities across SQL Server, SharePoint, and Office. And what we did at the beginning of Denali is we had a bunch of planning that we did, and that resulted in a set of what we call the 2-pagers. And they're just little documents about scenarios that we're missing, and also had a discussion about what the mission is and how we divide up the offerings of BI across the different divisions at Microsoft. So the outcome of that is that on the Office side, we want to make sure that Excel is the analyst tool of choice, right? So if you're doing analysis, we want you to be in Excel, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that I can't disclose about what they're doing for the next version of Excel, but it's all very BI related, and it's all very cool and coming, and in the next couple of months you'll hear more about that. But Excel is really analysis. The mission of Analysis Services in this release was to build a single unified BI semantic model, right? We went from having no semantic model to having like 3 or 4, right? And that's not very cool. So the mission of AS was to make sure that we had one unified semantic model. That's called the BI semantic model now. It has several ways that you can interact with it. You can interact with it as in UDM form, like you have in the past, or you can use the new tabular version of that model. But that's the work the AS team has been doing. On my team, on the RS team, our mission for this release is to deliver thin ad hoc reporting and self-service alerting. Those were the two big things that we had missed in the previous release, and that's what we're focusing on now. And we, of course, also have some other secondary priorities across RS around SharePoint integration and performance, making it easier to configure and deploy. This is something we've focused on over time, but it continues to be probably the #1 pain point. It's just getting everything up and running and configured and installed. So we're continuing to work on that. Delivering the updated formats and then upgrading our development tools to bids to Dev 10 and Dev 11 as we move forward. So those of you that were at my session yesterday, I did cover this slide a little bit, but for the half of you that weren't, there are several pillars around Denali as a release in whole, and they're mission-critical platform, developer and IT productivity, and pervasive insight. On the mission-critical platform side, this is really led by the always-on capability that we're introducing for SQL Server, and it's about high availability and scalability and making sure that really you can support mission-critical and you have a great way to do failover and disaster recovery and all that stuff. So look for Always On if you're interested in some of the new capabilities there. We also focus on data warehousing. We introduced Parallel Data Warehouse just with the Denali release, and we'll be continuing to work on a whole bunch of things there, including the appliance offerings that we have coming up to really jumpstart your BI development and applications. So look for information about the appliances if you're interested in that. On developer and IT productivity, it's been the same mission. I mean, our lowest TCO focus and making it easy and fast for you to get to market with your solutions through the tools that we have in Visual Studio and all of our other tools really make it easy to administer and help you get your solutions developed quickly. What we mostly focus on the BI side is, of course, the last pillar, which is pervasive insight and making sure that we reach every user in your organization through BI. We want data and using data to be a normal part of everybody's job, right? There's not a single person in the organization anymore who doesn't experience data and more of it over time. And so we want to really make sure that BI in all of its different forms is available to the different constituents in your organization. We started that work with the in-memory analytics with Power Pivot and the Vertipack engine in SQL Server 2008 R2. We've done a whole bunch of work to make that really enterprise scale. So in 2008 R2, you used the Power Pivot add-in inside of Excel to get these great models that were cached in memory, right? That technology has now been moved to the Analysis Services server, and you can use bids with a new project type in order to create the exact same models, and you can deploy them to the Analysis Services server so that you can have much bigger scale in-memory solutions. That same technology is also now available in the SQL Server relational database through the Project Apollo, which means that in a SQL Server relational database, you can now build a new index type, which is an in-memory index, and it's a column store in-memory index. So you can use it also in the SQL Server relational world. So there are many ways now to have great in-memory performance and to have that at scale. And that's a big part of pervasive insight. And also with Project Crescent, what we focus on is making all of that surfaced and available to your end users via our end user tools. Okay? For reporting services specifically, there are 3 pillars, and the 3 pillars basically map to the things that I've talked to you a little bit already. First, on the left-hand side is empower end users. This is really all about Project Crescent, and I'm going to show you demos of all of these things. It's just a high-level slide. But basically, ad hoc reporting, making sure that end users can have access to the information they need, and they're not waiting around for us as developers and IT folks to develop those solutions for them. They can really self-service themselves. But do it in a way that's managed by you, right? You guys want visibility, you want oversight, you want control over what they have access to, how much they have access, and to be able to see what's going on in the system. So Crescent with the BI semantic model gives you that capability. The middle pillar is productivity and proactive intelligence, and that's where end user alerting comes in. This is really about the ability for end users, when they're looking at a particular report, to be able to get a notification when some data in that report changes. So this is more the corporate BI scenario, less the ad hoc scenario. But if you're creating lots of reports, which you probably do in your organization, your users are consuming them, they don't want to have to necessarily go out to the same report every day to figure out if a value has changed, right? They should be able to create a little rule that says, when this value crosses some threshold, send me an email, let me know. So I'm going to show you that. And then the new formats. And then finally, with the SharePoint integration, reporting services in SharePoint mode, we are now a native service of SharePoint, and that gives us a lot more depth of integration with SharePoint. And so let's cover that first. So infrastructure investments, SharePoint mode. So today, which includes SQL Server 2008 R2, when you provide the reporting services capability in SharePoint, it can be a little bit challenging to configure the integration because you're using both configuration that's partially in SharePoint and then partially outside of SharePoint. Right? There are some things you have to do in our config tool that's separate of SharePoint. Logging is separate of SharePoint. There's a bunch of stuff that basically it's doable, but it's a little bit harder than it should be. And you can't, there's not one place that you go to do all of your reporting services management. So that often leads to some conflict of skills where you have to divide up your management of reporting services between your DBAs who are using SSMS and the configuration tools and your SharePoint admins who need to manage the service in SharePoint. So we want to kind of alleviate that friction and make it much easier and have basically one place where you can go and manage your reporting services integration, and that place is SharePoint, of course. That helps you maximize your IT capability, and it makes it easier to basically have TCO because it's using all the skill sets that you've already developed around SharePoint. So there are also some real benefits to being a real SharePoint shared service. And some of these are probably pretty big. I've already talked to a couple of you who said that some of these are important. But basically, with the new SharePoint integration, you get to use the SharePoint shared service app pool. So there's no separate reporting services app pool anymore. When you configure reporting services in integrated mode, you just use the same app pool as SharePoint itself. There's one set of catalogs now, and that's the SharePoint Service App DBs. So there's no separate reporting services catalog that you have to manage separately. That's just all part of the deployment and part of the SharePoint Service App DBs. The big one, the one that's probably gotten the most traction, is that we now also support WCF and claims-based authentication with reporting services, because that is part of how SharePoint does its authentication. Right? So that's a big deal. The other big deal is probably the PowerShell commandlets. So you used to have to do your configuration and your scripting in WMI, which is what reporting services used to support. But now you can actually use PowerShell, and we have a bunch of new commandlets that you can use in PowerShell for reporting services, and you can look those up. I'm not going to cover them in depth today. But also now you can manage everything through the central admin UI for RS. I'll show you that. And then there's a bunch of new logging that we do, and all of that is integrated into your SharePoint logging, so it takes advantage of ULS. And finally, we no longer have to handle our own scale out and load balancing, because that's all part of SharePoint, and being a service of SharePoint is that the load balancing is actually handled by SharePoint itself, which is a great benefit for us. Laptop fell asleep. And then some new performance improvements. What we actually found is that when we did the SharePoint integration, big reports were running fine, but the small reports got slower because of having basically another layer of infrastructure in the middle, which was SharePoint, right? So that was one of the big reasons why some of our customers were not able to upgrade to SharePoint integrated mode from native mode when it became available. We've spent a whole ton of time on performance, and we, in our own testing, have found that we're about 30 to 60% faster in SharePoint integrated mode than we are in native mode now. So that's great news. And what we want you to do is to go and get CTP3 and test it out, because you guys have a whole ton of different variety of reports and different types of data that we probably are able to test internally, and we want to validate some of those findings and make sure there still aren't places where there may be bottlenecks in report processing. So let us know. Please do go try it out. Okay, and then finally, in SQL Server, when you install SQL now, there's an option to install SSRS in SharePoint mode so that you get basically a single install experience, even though there is still the add-in that you have to install on the SharePoint web front end. Okay? This is, hopefully that will come back. Okay, so the installation and configuration experience for the IT folks, especially in the room, who need to do this and get it all up and running, you need to install the RS add-in on the SharePoint web front ends and install the RS SharePoint shared service on the SharePoint app servers. So there's basically two parts to the install. Then you go and configure and create your service directly via the central admin UI. And you do all your scripting in PowerShell, and you diagnose with the SharePoint ULS logs, and then you can leverage SharePoint backup and restore so that you can back up your databases, back up your reports, things like that. Okay? All right, so let me go ahead and show you that real quick. I'm hoping that this is just because you took over my window, except I can't see it on my laptop. It's going to make it a little hard. Let's see. Turn card, nope. Did you flip something in the back so that I can't see it on my screen? That's weird. I can do this, but the other demos are going to be a little more difficult. I'll have to look up there. Make sure I'm clicking in the right place. I'm gonna just,
That's odd.
yeah, it's really odd.
Where are we?
That's right here. Yes, let's turn on carrot browsing so that we can see it. Okay. Okay, well, a new challenge.
Yeah. Just pop the output out for a second. That should default back. Oh, come on. Nice.
Wow.
All right. That's weird.
Okay, well, I'm not worried that the demo is not going to work. I just won't be able to see it. All right, that's okay. We'll march on. All right, so in Central Admin, which is what I have open, you can go ahead. This is actually really hard. You never know how much you spatially zoom in on left and right. Okay. Yeah. Hey, you're not supposed to see that yet. Oh, he knows what he's doing. I don't really need to change my resolution. I just need to duplicate it. Okay, we're not going to worry about it. It'll be just fine. Where is it? Change display. Down, down. Right there? Oh, yeah, okay. Laptop. Verify display configuration. It looks okay.
Just scroll down.
Windows P. Oh, hey, all right. Woohoo! Did that work? That didn't work either. Darn it. Well, let's do that and then make it a. It's just my screen is like dead. Okay, that's okay. I will manage.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, that's okay. All right, so if I get this done and right, the presenter score must be really, really high. You must vote well. Okay, so in general application settings, if you come here, I believe, actually, let's go to application management. There are service applications now, and if you go to the service applications, you'll find that there's a reporting services app somewhere here. Yep, report app right there. SQL Server reporting services app. I can read that. Okay, so here is where you're going to find all your configuration settings, right? So you can set your system settings. This is where you go and set the timeout for the report server, how long your reports are going to run for, the timeout session, whether you're going to enable execution logging, whether you're going to turn on some of the features, right? That's all in this particular page. Some of the other important settings that you need to have are you need to manage your jobs, figure out how, if you want to create schedules and things like that, you can see the jobs here. You can manage the subscriptions and alerts here. We'll talk about alerting. Their email settings. The other important thing is key management. Please make sure you figure out what your keys are. Back them up, put them somewhere. Right? Keys get lost sometimes, and they're very hard to retrieve, and you call CSS, and that can be a frustrating experience. So make sure that you grab your keys here too. Okay, for logging, what you want to do is go to, let's go back to Central Admin, and go to, somebody tell me where logging is. Right there? No. Up. Down one. Okay, reporting, logging, view, thanks, configure, logging, there we go. Okay, so when you come in here now, you'll see reporting services, and there's a whole bunch of stuff you can log, and you get to decide the granularity of what you want to log and how you want to log it. So basically, you can log all the different types of renderings that we do. You can log tools. You can log access to the server, all the runtimes, all the different export formats that we have. So all of those are here, and you can turn them on and off and use them that way. Okay, and that's all integrated into ULS logging. There is an old, if you're using reporting services with an old database, there's still some leftover UIs to make sure that you can continue to manage that. So if you come into Central Admin and you go to Application Settings, that's actually where the old stuff is. So if you're using 2008 and 2008 R2, but you're not using Denali, this is where you go to configure your reporting services configuration. But don't confuse that with the new stuff, which is all in the other location that I showed you, which is in the shared app area. Okay? So that just gives you really quick, like I said, very high-level overview of where the integration settings are for reporting services. So let's go back to the slides real quick. Yeah? Mm-hmm.
Is that SharePoint Foundation or server? Can you run it on Foundation?
You can run it on Foundation. Reporting services is supported in Foundation. There are some features that are not enabled in Foundation. Okay? Okay. Next thing we're going to talk about is self-service alerting. And with self-service alerting, what we're doing is basically, like I mentioned at the very beginning, users really need to respond to exception changes in their data. There's tons of reports out there. There's a ton of data. Users get lost in data all the time. This happens to me, right? I get a whole ton of reports every morning. I think I might have told this story yesterday. But we run our entire group on reporting services. Everything is a report, right? We have a dog food server. We track our projects in reporting services reports. We track all of our bugs. I get subscriptions. I get probably like 20 emails every morning that tells me everything about every project that I work on. And we run Scrum. So I run 5 Scrum teams. And that means I get 5 reports just for Scrum that tells me exactly what's going on in each Scrum team. And that's a ton of data, right? So I really need to know when things are kind of off track. So just tell me if the stories are not progressing the way they are, if the bug counts are getting too big. So I want to create little rules that will send me an email only when that data reaches certain thresholds. And that's what self-service alerting is all about. So it's about responding and being able to cope with lots of information with really easy to define rules that allow users to get really the exception reporting that they need. So let's go ahead and look at that. Hopefully this won't be quite as challenging as reading that particular screen. In reporting services, what self-service alerting works off of traditional reporting services reports. And what that means is that any report that you build with BIDS and Report Builder today, you can create alerts off of. The screen thing better not kill SharePoint. That would make things worse. But I have it up. OK, let's do that. So here I have a little report that I'm going to run. Shared documents. It's a little tiny report. It's very simple, just so to make sure that it's easy to understand kind of what's going on in the scenario. So this little report, that's a little project tracking report. There are basically 4 people on my team. And each person has a set of tasks that they need to complete. And I just want to know if the tasks are off track. I don't want to know about the tasks that are on track. And you can see that here, George, when I expand him, he's been visiting the Gold Coast. And he's going to some training. And for some reason, he's a little late on his deliverables, right? So I hear that people here, they're very social at night. So maybe that has something to do with him being a little late. With his deliverables. So I want to know when those tasks go off track. So if I come up here to actions now, I can create a new data alert. That's what it says, right? OK, good. And what that's going to do is it's going to bring up a little UI, and it's a Silverlight UI. And it's going to show me all of the data that's in that report. Okay? That's going to show up on the left-hand side as a list of data feeds. And in this simple report, I only have one data feed. If you have a more complex report, each data region in general is a data feed. It could be one or more data feeds, depending on the data sources. But that'll all show up here, and the user can select which data feed that they want to point at. And they'll see the data right below, and that's the data feed that I have. And on the right-hand side, I have basically the UI that I need to create my little rule. So project tracking, I'm going to call it broken screen. That's the demo we're doing today. And alert me if any data in the feed has met this rule or doesn't meet the rule, right? So it's just a yes or no type of question, and or. And here it says I'm going to add a new rule. And the rule is based on some field in the data feed, right? So I'm saying the person, oh, not the person, the due date. And I want it to be, I can specify a specific date with the calendar. Or I can say I want to actually select a field to compare to. So I want to know when the due date is something about where the due date, where the completed date is greater than, is after, and field selection, the due date, right? So that's my little simple rule. And it's just as easy as that to create a rule. I can add another rule. Pick a different clause. I can string them all together. They're ANDed together, and do that. And I can schedule exactly how frequently I want to run this rule. And you can see I got daily, weekly, hourly, and by minute. It's a really good spam engine, so try to not have your users get per minute notifications, right? So you can do it daily, every 1 day or 2 days. And you can actually use schedules also. So if you've got some scheduling you want to do, you can start it on something else. And another really great thing that we added in CTB3, because it was a really good spam engine, is that option that says generate alert message only if the result has changed. Okay? So if the alert gets triggered once, if the same data is triggering the same alert, you don't really need to have that alert sent to you again. You've already seen it, right? So that's the option that turns off delivering the alert based on the exact same data change as the last time that the alert was run. So it'll only deliver if the condition that's met is different, right? So if sales are greater than 50 and sales are greater than 50 for the same value the next time, you won't get another alert. And then you can specify 1 or more persons to receive the alert. And when you're done with that, you can just save it. And then if you come back in SharePoint and look for project tracking, you can now go and manage my data alerts. And when I do that, you'll see the list of my alerts, right? I've got a couple that I created before. And one of the really nice things you can do is you can just go ahead and fire the alert so that you can test it. And it'll just take it a sec to run. And we'll just refresh it a couple of times. I don't have an alert, a mail server here, so what I'm going to do, the alert was fired, is I had it delivered basically to a directory. And I'll just go and see if I can find that directory. So it goes to C, to email, and you'll see that today, the 31st, there's my email. And this is the alert, the message that was generated. George was in a training, and that caused it to be late. Actually, Kate's also a little bit late, some due date that's way past her time. So that you're going to get a link to go and look back at that report and see what's going on there. But, you know, very simple to get these kind of alerts. Didn't have to configure anything to design this page or anything like that. That just all gets generated automatically. Okay, so that's a quick demo of end user alerting from the end user point of view. From the management point of view, what you can do is when you go to site settings, that's probably it, right? Okay. So under site settings, there's now a reporting services section, and you get manage data alerts here. That means you as the administrator can come in and see all of the alerts on this particular site. And if you go to the central admin and manage data alerts there, you can see all of the alerts across the farm. Okay? So here, this is the exact same list because I'm the only user who's creating alerts right now. But you can filter the alerts by the person, or you can filter the alerts by the report and look at the alerts there and manage them here as the admin of this site. Okay? So you can go and help somebody or remove them or something like that. So that's how you manage them. Okay, so let's switch back to the slides. This is an enterprise feature. It's a good question. Licensing is not fully set yet, so I don't know. It's leaning that way, though. Okay.
And does it require SharePoint, or you can do all of this in standalone?
Does it require SharePoint? Yes, it requires SharePoint. That we know for sure already. Yeah.
Can you create an alerts library?
Can you?
Just can say I want to share this?
Can you create an alerts library? No, only admin today has the ability. We basically targeted at the person creating the alert today. That's a good suggestion, though. All right. So really quickly, let's get through this so we can move on to some of the other features. Benefits, obviously, you can create alerts directly when you're looking at the data. That's the time that you want to create the alert, right? You don't want users to come in and have some general notion of something that they want to indicate on, but not know how to get access to that data, right? They're looking at the report directly. They're saying, hey, this is a really interesting value. I need to know when this changes. So they can do that directly from the report. And it supports, like I said, reports built in Report Builder today or in bids. So all the reports that you're already building, you can create alerts with them as soon as you get Denali. It's really easy to use. You can schedule when you want the alert to be sent, and you can manage it through SharePoint. And that's this next one, which is just the ability to have it all integrated within SharePoint mode and have you, as an IT person or a DBA, be able to manage them and see them and control them in SharePoint. Key capabilities, obviously it supports operational reporting, which means you can use stored credentials with them, easier to run. It's all integrated with SharePoint mode and SharePoint permissions. There's two tools, the Alert Designer and the Alert Manager. The Alert Manager is the list of alerts. Very simple rules. You get the message that is auto-formatted for the user with the data. You can schedule it, and it's all loggable and ready to use out of the box. Okay. And quick architecture slide. There is a new little component that gets integrated into the SharePoint web front end when you install that add-in for reporting services in integrated mode. And then on the back end, there's a new little alert service that runs with a runtime on the app server. And the workflow looks like this. So the user goes, runs a report, creates the definition. That gets stored in the alerting database, which is in SharePoint mode, so it's part of the content DBs. And then the SQL Server agent job is created for that alert. And when the job is triggered, the alert gets into the alert queue. And we go and read the data feed from the report, apply any of the conditions, create the alert instance, and then deliver it via email. So that's how the workflow works. All right, and then next, we updated our XML, our rendering formats so that we support the new docx and XLSX formats. So this is one of the pain points for people who have moved onto the later versions of Office, is that they still are living with the limitations that we have because we render in 2003 formats prior to Denali. But with that move to the new formats, basically we're getting a zip compressed file, which is what docx and XLSX are, which means the export formats are now smaller, right, which is really great. So it doesn't, if you're putting on a file share or something, it doesn't take nearly as much room. You also get the benefits in Excel of being able to go from 65,000 rows to 1 million rows and 16,000 columns. And you will be surprised, amazed, because I was, how many people run into that limitation with reporting services reports. And you also get 56 color palettes instead of the 20-bit color palette. So those are some of the big benefits that we're seeing. All right, so let's move on to Project Crescent. Crescent, like I said, is our new ad hoc reporting offering from Reporting Services, and this is the mission statement for Crescent. It's an interactive data exploration and visual presentation experience. And what that really means is it's really about slicing and dicing for an end user to be able to get insights into the data. And it's about really visually presenting that data and being able to share that data with other folks. So I covered this slide yesterday also, but for those that are new, there are basically 3 tenets to Project Crescent. We want it to be highly visual so that it's really easy to use. It's built upon the familiar Microsoft Office paradigms, and it has some really cool, kind of powerful visualizations to help you consume lots of data all at once visually. Okay? It's rich metadata driven, and there's a ton of interactivity in it, which I'll show you. Because it's fully integrated with Power Pivot and the BI semantic model, we can do a whole bunch of interactivity that is out of the box that the users don't have to configure. And it's presentation ready at all times, and I'll show you that. Basically, we design for the screen specifically and for projection. So all your content fits on the screen. It can be projected. You can take it to a meeting and share it with other people really easily. So since a whole bunch of you were in yesterday's session, I will do a different demo than I did yesterday and show you a little bit of Crescent. Maybe we should try output 3 or something. That's okay. All right, so when I'm in SharePoint, and let's go back to that shared documents, I hope. I have a data source here, which is essentially, it's based off of real data. It's an oil and gas data set. So it's about a particular oil producer, and it's their oil production across all their business units. Okay. Project Crescent is a Silverlight tool. So what you see is a rich Silverlight-based environment, which means it's all on the web. It requires Silverlight 4 and CTB3, and everything I'm showing you is available in CTB3. So if you want to go ahead and pick up CTB3 and use it, this is exactly what you'll get. When we ship, by the time we ship, we will have a dependency on Silverlight 5, And a lot of that is because we're working very, very closely with the Silverlight team and making sure that there's some performance and bugs and a couple of new features that they're adding specifically for us to make sure that our experience in Crescent is really good. So we will have that for Silverlight 5 dependency by the time we ship. So let's take a look at the oil and gas data. And basically what they have is a set of business units. And the business units basically define geographic areas where there's drilling of oil and gas. So there are 3 business units. There's the Gulf Coast, San Joaquin, and something else. And in each of those business units, they have a set of production that they have. So there's some actual production, and they do forecasting of their production. So I'll just grab some data and put it in. You see everything lands in a little table, and I've got my production and forecast numbers for each of the different business units. Okay? As a user, all I did was come in and start clicking on things to explore the data. Data is live. It's not like we're doing sampling or anything like that. So those of you, many of you work with reporting services today, you kind of design in this design mode that's abstract, right, where you see the structure of what you're going to create, but then you got to go and press the run button in order to see the results. That's not the case in Crescent. In Crescent, you always see the live data. And that's why performance is really, really important. We build it on top of the Vertipack engine of the in-memory store so that it's very fast and performant. Okay? You can use it against SQL Server Relational in a pass-through mode called direct query, but you got to make sure you're going to tune your performance of that database to be really, really fast so that the experience here is really good. So let's go ahead and look at also by the different assets. Underneath the business unit are the divisions, and the divisions are these assets. And we'll actually look at the actuals by business unit. And everything, like I said, lands as a little table on the page, and then you can go and convert that to any of the other visualizations. So if I want that to be a line chart, I just go ahead and click that, and it'll turn it into a line chart. And that's my production across all of my different products. Now it happens that when you drill for oil or gas, you don't get to pick what you get, right? You think they do a lot of exploration and they figure out that if I drill here I get oil. That's actually not the case. If I look at the products, I could put them there, but I don't really want them there. I want them here. So if I look at the products, you'll see that when we drill, we actually get oil and gas, and we actually get a lot of water too. Water just comes out of, there's a lot of water in the ground, and that comes out when you start drilling also. The other thing is we can look at it by date and grab year and grab actual production by year. And you'll see that variance also. And look at it by product. And get by product name. Okay? So you can really easily see just in a few clicks, me as an end user, I get a really good overview of what's going on in my business. And the one thing I said about having interactivity, so if I come here and say, well, I want to look at gas, I can do that, and what that's going to do, it's going to limit the chart on the left to gas and highlight the chart on the right. Right? That interactivity comes for free with Crescent. If I come in and reset it, and I change this particular data set to a, let's do like a stacked bar, for example. If I come in here, it'll also highlight, right? And it'll show me the stacks over there that are relevant, okay? So there's a whole bunch of interactivity that we drive for free out of what we have, out of the box that the user doesn't have to configure. That just comes with the application and the fact that we understand all the data that's going on in the queries that are being built, okay? Another great visualization that we like a lot, of course, is this bubble chart capability. And what I'm going to do is, since it's a little hard for me to kind of build it from scratch, I'll cheat a little bit and at least start with it. Basically what I have is on the bottom, I've got a set of the actual production. Across the top is the variance. And you can see that we have one particular area that we build a lot of, that gets a lot of production. That's the shelf area, right? If I want to look at that over time, I grab month, And it's going to plop month on this play axis field because there's really nowhere else to put it on that particular visualization. And it's giving you a little warning that there's a whole ton of data. So I may want to come in and, for example, filter that data set down so that I have a little more, a little less data to work with. And I'm going to plop it right here. Hey, see, it really did work. If you were at my session on Monday, you'll notice that it didn't work on Monday or yesterday. So if I limit that down, I can get just a few less years, and you'll see that start to affect the visualization on the right. So once I have the data that I kind of want to narrow to, I can come in and start playing that data over time, right? So I can see what the trend is over time of that data, and I can see the shifting of the bubbles, right? And it's kind of a weird, jumpy trend in this case. But this is real data. That's reality, right? The data I showed you yesterday of the growth over time, that was a little massage. So you get a really nice trend. But the interesting thing is when we showed this data to one of the oil execs, he looked at the trend and he actually saw that there were some triangles in the way that the bubbles were jumping over time. And that's because when you produce oil and gas, it's very seasonal. It's actually a lot dependent on the weather and when they can drill and stuff like that. So they can't drill in certain months of the year because there's lots of storms, right? So you get production goes down a lot during those times. And so that he could see that in the data, which was really cool. Some of the other visualizations that you can do with Crescent are if I have, for example, this little line chart, and I want to come in and create, compare the different business units, I can go and grab the asset name and put it, for example, on this vertical axis, this vertical multiple. And what that does is it gives me for each asset the exact same chart, right? So now I can visually compare and see how my fields are doing compared to each other. And that was just a single dropping of a field, right? I can control, as an end user, the layout of this visualization. I can say I want to see 4 instances at a time and scroll through the instances, right? Or I want to see all of them at a time and try to do that. And there's some, I don't have quite enough instances, so they all show up, right? You can also, of course, do highlighting here. So I can focus on the gas production, and I can see that my biggest gas producer is Shelf, and there's been a steep decline in gas production in Shelf. That's really concerning because it's my biggest production area, right? And I can easily compare that to all my other production areas. The only one that actually seems to be increasing is Texas. So I might be a little bit concerned about my overall production here, okay? And then I can look at oil, and I can look at water. We actually are producing more and more water over time. So maybe we should change our business model a little bit. So really easy to see these kinds of trends in data, right? Another type of visualization that we have is what we call bands. And bands are actually really easy to create. It's just a little field, a tile by field. And what it does is it allows you to have a little space that allows you to navigate each individual instance separately, right? So for lots and lots of data, this is a new type of navigation that allows you to focus on the details of each particular item, but also on the right-hand side have some summary information about all the business units. So this is all the business units. And here for Gulf Coast, this is telling me the variance from my actual to forecast about each of the different types of things that I produce, oil, gas, and water. And it shows me for each business unit the variance of that production. And you can tell in the Gulf Coast, production has declined across, is lower than what we forecasted in all the different areas, and it's decreasing. Okay, that's bad. So that allows you to have a really great way to just navigate data. That's some of the functionality that comes with Crescent. Obviously, I didn't get a chance to show you everything because it's an overview, but go ahead and try it out, give us feedback, and let us know what you think. All right, so let's switch back to the slides. 6. We're back on 6? Okay. All right, so a little bit of overview also of some other investments that we're making in Denali. First of all, we're integrating our dev tools into 2010 and Dev 11. RVP, obviously you guys have felt some of this pain. We had shipping of Dev 9, basically, and it took a long time for us to ship the next version of SQL Server, so you had this mismatch of tools in your organization. We're not going to do that anymore. So RVP committed to the VSVP that SQL Server would update its tools within 3 months of whenever Visual Studio ships. Okay? That's a big challenge, which means because we're going to be developing at the same time that they're developing, but that's great for you guys because that means that when the new version of VS rolls out and you adopt the new version of VS, that's going to be the same version you're going to be able to use for your regular applications as well as for SQL Server applications. Okay? So we're working on that. One of the things that we want to do as part of that is basically move out our controls from being installed with VS to a separate package so that we can update them more frequently also. So you'll see that our install will get chained in, but it'll be a separate package that gets installed. So to give us a little more flexibility in how we deploy. But we are moving to VS 10, that is done. That's with CTB3, that's already done. And we're also working on some new developments for shipping directly in Dev 11. And the last thing I want to cover is Azure reporting. How many of you are interested in the cloud? Just out of curiosity. Okay, it's still a little bit new. So we have a CTP of reporting services in the cloud that's been out there. It's basically CTB2. That sign-up has closed, but there's a new round of sign-ups that are coming up. So if you are interested in trying it out, there's a link in my slide deck, and you can go and sign up for it. I believe the new beta will be sometime this month or next month, something like that. So the value proposition, who is this for? We are not able to upfront move everything that we have directly into SQL Azure reporting. So what we've done is we picked developers as our main target for developing cloud applications and reporting in the cloud. And we picked corporate BI. So what I showed you in Crescent will not be available with the first releases of the cloud, right? So it's reports that are built in either BIDS or Report Builder, targeted at developers and system integrators and consultants and IT departments for building these solutions in the cloud. The benefit you get, of course, is the same, similar benefits that you have with any cloud offering, which is elasticity, scalability, and the reliability. It's very cost effective. Obviously, you don't have to have the capital in-house. We host all of that for you, and that can lead to a lot of decrease in expenditure and also time to solution. And it's very symmetrical. It's one set of tools, whether you're developing for on-premise or in the cloud. It's BIDS and it's Report Builder. The only difference between those two, whether you're deploying on-premise or on cloud, is the location of the deployment and your data source, right? So if you're developing a reporting services cloud report, the data source has to be a SQL Azure database, okay? So you need to have your data up in SQL Azure, and then you can create reports against it using Report Designer or Report Builder. The infrastructure, it has SQL Azure for the data tier and Windows Azure for hosting. There's an RS gateway that does tenant isolation, and it does the routing of the requests. There is multi-tenancy as a stateless RS engine that's shared, and it's performant because the RS databases are located in SQL Azure alongside your user databases. Okay, so the V1 scenario, like I said before, operational reporting and embedded reporting, and I'm going to show you both of those. This I'm leaving in the deck. I'm not going to talk about it, but these are basically the hints you need in order to get one of these solutions up and running. You got to make sure that you're deploying BIDS to a server. If you're doing it locally, it's server name report server. If you're doing it to the cloud, it's server name reporting database windows.net something, right? And then there's an example right there, which I'm going to show you. And we actually have a couple of examples, so you can go out and kind of take a look and see what a report looks like in the cloud. And it's really the same as if you were deploying it on-premise yourself. So let's take a look at that real quick. Let's go back to the 2. So here I have a solution in BIDS. It's just a regular report that I've built in BIDS, and it's consists of competitors. I've got a little spark line and a little a data bar and a little sparkline and a little KPI. The only difference is in this data source, if I take a look at the properties, oops, not that properties. If I take a look at the data source itself, you see that the data source is some cloud instance, right, .NET. And it tells me what the catalog is. It's got some authentication information in it. That's really the only difference. The design experience is exactly the same. When you deploy this thing, you want to deploy it to a cloud instance. And that looks like this, HTTP something reporting database windows.net report server. Okay? And I won't deploy it right now, but I can run it and show it to you. It'll go and run that. And basically, it's going out, grabbing the data, and bring it back in. So this is the data from the cloud piped back into BIDS, okay, local processing. So once I deploy that, it'll go to the cloud service. I can hit a URL and see the same thing. I'll show you that in the other form, which is if I want to create a Visual Studio project that includes an application that includes a cloud report, I can stick a report viewer control inside of my application. This is just a little ASPX page that has a report viewer control on it. And you can see the only difference is you're choosing the report server as your location instead of a local report. And the URL is a cloud URL, HTTPS. That's where I would have deployed this report to, right? And the report path is some path from that URL. So I can go ahead and actually run this solution and show it to you. And it'll go ahead and take a minute to run and bring it back. I actually pre-deployed this to a cloud service with its own URL, and I'll show that to you live in just a sec. So what it's doing is it's just building the solution and running it locally, going and grabbing that data, and it'll load it. Any questions about that while it's going? There's a question over there? No? Okay. So there's my report, and I did deploy it earlier. I deployed it to this location. That's where my app is, right? And if I go to IE and run it, that's my cloud app that I published, and it'll go ahead and run it live. And that's how you get a report into the cloud, an application into the cloud that points at a report that's in the cloud. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, so we have two controls that we ship. We have a WinForms control and an ASPX control, and that's the ASPX control. Yeah. It's part of VS. So when you install VS, you get the report controls. Yeah. Yep, so the controls allow you to use reporting services as standalone mode embedded in your application. You don't, at that point, you can use it in server mode or you can use it in local mode. If you're using our controls in local mode, you're creating a local data source and you're piping data to the control directly instead of going through the report server. That runs. Okay, so there's the exact same report that I created, integrated into my application, and it's in the cloud. So let's go back. That is the end of the slides, and I'll take some questions and answers, about 10 minutes. Before I do that, I just want to remind you to fill out your evaluations and make sure you do that, because that's the next slide, and I always forget. Questions? Yep.
The project present thing with the interactive reporting,
Mm-hmm.
the demonstration you showed it through SharePoint. Is it possible to integrate that just through a regular ASP.NET app?
Yeah, good question. So the question is Project Crescent only available in SharePoint mode? And it's only available in SharePoint mode in this release. Yeah. So we'll take feedback about that. We have to make decisions about where we make investments up front. A lot of the focus was in creating Crescent at all in this release. So, ask for it. Mm-hmm. Yes. So native mode is still very much supported. So you still have Report Manager. You can still run things in native mode. There are no enhancements to Report Manager itself. Yeah, in this release. Yep.
How will we be shipping the updates to Studio?
How will we be shipping the updates to VS 2010?
Yeah, the new report design components for 2000.
Oh, yeah. So how do we ship the VS components for 2010? For bids, bids comes in the SQL Server box. What's being discussed right now is whether it's going to be a web download instead of on the CD. But that just means that there'll just be a little feature pack that has bids and you can install it. You don't have to install full VS in order to use bids. There's a version of bids that's licensed with SQL Server. Okay? All right. Yeah?
Can 2008 and 2008 R2 reporting services coexist on the same server with Denali?
Yeah, so the question is, can 2008 R2 coexist on the same server as Denali? And the answer is yes. You can have different instances. You can point them at different catalog versions, and that should be fine. Yeah. Uh-huh. Now, are there any other new export formats? Not in Denali. Certainly, we've heard in the past that PowerPoint is a very important export format. I don't know if that's the one that you're thinking of. What's the export format that you're missing? PDF. Oh, yeah, PDF is supported. Yeah, we already have that. Mm-hmm. The data source that I use for Project Crescent in SharePoint, can it be an external source? Okay, so the story with analysis services is that if you have existing cubes, Project Crescent cannot currently support existing cubes, but we've committed to delivering that as soon as we can after the official Denali release. I don't know exactly when that's going to be. That work has started, but Crescent will run on top of existing cubes at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later. Mm-hmm. The data source lives in SharePoint, yeah. So Crescent is available in SharePoint mode only in this release. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, so authentication in SharePoint mode. We support stored credentials, Windows, Forms Auth, and now claims in WCF. So you have some choices in authentication. Okay. I don't think so, but you can actually create your own security extension. Reporting services is built as a platform. There's a ton of places that you can inject your own code. One of them is security extensions. You can have your own custom processing extension. You can have your own custom rendering extension. And people do these all the time. For rendering, like people render to printers all the time. For processing, our partners internally, like Dynamics, they have very specific processing needs for the queries, so they write their own processing extension. And there's a whole bunch of places that you can inject your own capabilities. Mm-hmm.
Any new features in DocX and XLSX renderers, or that powered?
Any new features? So the number one priority for DocX and XLSX is that everything looked exactly the same. So we didn't want to break any reports moving to the new format. The only new features were a couple of the ones that I mentioned around the things that come with Excel natively, the new row limits and the fact that it's compressed, and that's just a benefit of the format itself. So we didn't add any new features specifically. But there were some in Denali, in SQL Server 2008 R2, that were around the export formats. So being able to name tabs and a couple of those DCRs that customers really wanted, we did that in R2. Talk to me about that later. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Like with charts and visualization and stuff like that outside of Prism, is there been enhancements to the charts?
Enhancements to the charts and stuff. We did a whole bunch of that in SQL Server 2008 R2. We're not doing any of that in Denali because of the focus on Crescent, but any DCRs that you have, file them, and we'll take a look at them for the next release. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Is there an easy way to set an application role when running a report?
Yeah, so you can store credentials either inside the report or use stored credentials in the data source to to basically authenticate what you want the report to run as when you run it. You mean what kind of application role?
Application role when retrieving the data from the database.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you can store credentials in the data source, and that'll pass that whatever user that is to the underlying database, right? I may not understand you correctly. Ask me more detail if I don't.
Yeah. Usually when you use application role
from something from the SQL server.
Uh-huh.
What we have in our company is we do an exact SP_set F role.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, no, you can't do that. So you have to, the credentials you store in the data source are as part of the connection information. Yeah, okay. You might be able to, if you're going to store that role, is it dynamic or is it hard-coded?
Either way.
You can put whatever you can actually run a stored procedure or put whatever you want in the query string. You can try it there. I think we might strip it out though because that doesn't sound like a really safe thing to do. Yeah. Thank you very much. I'll be here. Lots of questions.